If you follow Sports Science Insight, subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because today we are using a viral sports story to make a practical coaching point. Cristiano Ronaldo, Luka Modric, Serena Williams, Venus Williams, Lewis Hamilton. The current question is everywhere. Are elite athletes now peaking later, even into their 40s? The short answer is, not exactly. The more useful answer is that some athletes are extending competitive usefulness by managing the rate and consequences of decline better. That means smarter rolls, smarter loading, stronger recovery habits, better nutrition basics, and decades of tactical experience. So this is not a video about an anti-aging secret. It is about what coaches and athletes should actually learn when a 40-plus superstar is still performing on a global stage. To get there, we need to start with why this story is trending right now. The timing matters. A June 2026 Guardian feature brought this topic back into the spotlight by connecting several examples. Footballers at the 2026 World Cup, tennis legends returning through lower load formats like doubles, and Lewis Hamilton still competing in Formula 1 at 41. That is a powerful media story because it feels like sport has changed its biological clock. But the confirmed fact is more careful. We are seeing more visible examples of older elite athletes staying useful for longer, especially when their sport or role allows experience to compensate for some physical loss. For a coach, that distinction is everything. If you call it a new biological peak, you look for magic. If you call it extended competitive usefulness, you ask better questions. Which qualities still decide performance? Which qualities are declining? And how can the role or training week be adjusted? That brings us to the first myth. Longer careers do not automatically mean later peaks. A longer career and a later biological peak are not the same thing. Peak speed, explosive power, maximal recovery capacity, and tolerance for repeated high-intensity stress are still age-sensitive. An athlete can remain world-class while being less explosive than their younger version, if the sport rewards other qualities enough. That is why the examples are so interesting. A footballer may move from a role built on repeated explosive wide sprints to a role built more on positioning, timing, finishing, and reading the game. A tennis player may return in doubles, where court coverage demands are different. A driver may rely on experience, decision-making, and technical precision in a way that looks very different from pure sprint speed. So the real question is not, are they younger at 40? The real question is, which performance demands can they still meet, and which demands have they learned to reduce, replace, or protect? The Olympic data helps explain why that matters. Ruiz and colleagues analyzed Olympic athletes from 1988 to 2024 and grouped events by demand: anaerobic, aerobic, mixed, and skill-based. The pattern supports the coaching intuition. Anaerobic events had younger average athletes, around 24.1 years. Aerobic events were older, around 26.8 years. Skill-based events were older again, around 27.8 years. Those numbers are not a rule for every athlete, but they show that the body is not challenged the same way in every sport. When a sport depends heavily on explosive force produced quickly, aging tends to show up earlier. When success depends more on endurance, skill, anticipation, tactical control, or technical execution, older athletes can remain competitive for longer. That is why a 40-plus star should not be interpreted as proof that physiology has stopped changing. It should be interpreted as proof that performance is multidimensional. Now the coaching question becomes, how do you train the dimensions that still matter without breaking the athlete? The Caparros review on extended career athletes gives a useful framework. Older elite athletes need programming that balances age-related decline with expertise, injury history, load tolerance, monitoring, strength training, and the risk of both overload and detraining. That is very different from saying, just recover more. Recovery tools can help, but only when they are connected to training decisions. A GPS vest, a wellness score, an ice bath, or a blood marker is not the secret. The secret is whether those inputs change the week in a useful way. For example, if an older player has had a high number of accelerations, decelerations, or explosive actions, the staff may need to protect the next high-intensity exposure. But protecting does not mean removing intensity forever. It means placing the hardest work where it creates adaptation, and building enough low-stress space around it to recover. That same logic applies to nutrition. The basics matter, but the evidence does not support a magic formula. The Franzke scoping review is useful because it stops the nutrition story from becoming a supplement advertisement. The review identified 12 suitable reports on master athletes, across diverse sports and outcomes. Average protein intake in the included studies ranged from 1.0 to 1.9 grams per kilogram per day. But the authors also emphasized that the evidence is heterogeneous and limited, so it does not create a universal anti-aging protein dose for every older athlete. That is the practical balance. Protein is important for muscle, adaptation, and recovery. Total energy intake matters. Carbohydrates should match training demand. Sleep is still foundational, but none of that means a single macro target or supplement explains why exceptional athletes remain elite at 40. For the audience, the message is simple. Do not skip the basics while chasing marginal gains. Once the basics are consistent, individualization becomes useful, and that leads directly to coaching decisions. Here is the coaching shift. Do not coach the birth date. Coach the role, the demands, the injury history, and the athlete's current response to load. Start by auditing the qualities that decide success in that role. If speed and power still decide the game, they must be trained and protected, not ignored. If experience, positioning, timing, and decision-making carry more of the performance, then the role may be adapted to use those strengths. For the athlete, the key mistake is trying to copy the training week from age 22. The older athlete may still need high-intensity work, but the dose, spacing, and recovery cost have to be monitored more carefully. Easy days have a job. Strength training has a job. Mobility has a job. Nutrition and sleep have a job. The goal is not to train softly. The goal is to train precisely. That is how this trend becomes useful instead of just viral. So the verdict is this: 40-plus elite athletes are not proof that aging has disappeared. They are proof that performance can be protected longer when talent, resources, experience, role selection, load management, recovery, nutrition, and medical support all line up. For a few exceptional athletes, that can keep them visible at the top level deep into their career. But for coaches and regular athletes, the lesson is not to chase the celebrity routine. The lesson is to adapt intelligently. Protect speed and power when they matter. Use experience as a performance asset. Avoid large load spikes. Do not let detraining take away capacity. Build nutrition and sleep before buying the next recovery shortcut. If this helped you separate the hype from the sports science, subscribe to Sports Science Insight, leave a like, and send this to a coach or athlete who keeps asking whether 40 is the new athletic prime.